All right. First of all, well, I want to say thank you to Clio for having me as a speaker and for putting on this event. This is now my third ClioCon in a row, and I've enjoyed them all, and it gets bigger and better every year. So I'm really excited to be here, and I'm excited to share with you guys some views that I have about how technology is reshaping consumer legal services. And I think this is actually going to be a perfect segue from a lot of the stuff Jack just talked about, because I talk about a lot of the same concepts, kind of, so it's cool. All right, a little bit about me, kind of gave you the background, co-founder of Lexicata. I focus mainly on sort of the product, setting the vision for that, managing the development team. I'm also a blogger. Some of you may have read my blogs. I blog a lot about legal technology, and I spend a lot of time thinking about this stuff and researching, so that's me. All right, so let's go ahead and jump in. So this is just a quick little overview of what I'm going to be talking about today. First, I want to talk about pipes versus platforms. And so what that means, basically, I'm going to give an overview of sort of the internet business model, how it disrupts the status quo and unlocks massive scalability. So we've seen unprecedented growth in companies like Amazon, Facebook, Google. You know, seemingly overnight, they become multi-billion-dollar behemoth companies. So we're going to look at how that's possible. Next, we'll look at today's legal industry, sort of the legal landscape, the market conditions, how things are operating, the business model. And I also want to point out that there's a gap that I see in the market. And then finally, we're going to get into the legal industry of the future. And so kind of meshing these two concepts together, how technology is going to change things. I want to talk about platforms, automation, artificial intelligence, and sort of this new look legal business model of the future. All right, so let's jump right in. First of all, what is a platform? So I mentioned this topic, and Jack obviously just talked about platforms a little bit. So what really is a platform? Well, I want to use a specific definition, and it comes from a book called Platform Revolution. And they define it as, a platform is a plug-and-play business model that allows multiple participants, producers, and consumers to connect to it, interact with each other, and create and exchange value. So a few things to focus on with this. One, plug and play. That kind of implies how easy it is to kind of connect to this platform and utilize it. Also, multiple participants, you have producers and consumers. So the producer creates something of value and the consumer consumes it, and finally, they use the platform to exchange that value. All right, so we'll get much more in depth, so don't worry if you're confused right now. Okay, so I want to compare the platform model to a more traditional, what I will call pipe business model. So with the pipe model, as you can see in the diagram here, you have a producer. This is typically a company of some kind. They create something of value. They do all the processes necessary to produce it, and they deliver it to the end consumer through the pipe, right? It's a linear flow from producer to consumer. If you compare that to a platform, though, you see it operates quite differently, actually. The platform itself is provided by that entity, but they're not the ones producing the value. There's actually a third-party set of users producing the value that the end consumers are consuming. So let's look at let's look at a real-world example to nail this down. Okay, so Target versus Amazon, right? I'm sure pretty much everybody here has shopped probably at both Target and Amazon multiple times, so we're obviously very familiar. But they actually operate really differently behind the scenes. So Target is what I would call a pipe, right? So they build the stores, they buy all the merchandise wholesale, they stock the shelves, they bring you in, they check you out, and they sell you the goods. So you're the consumer, they're the retailer, and they deliver those products to you through a pipe business model. Amazon is a platform, and a lot of people may actually not really know this, but Amazon is not actually selling you the majority of the things sold on Amazon. It's actually third-party companies or people, it could be anybody. So you can sign up and become a seller on Amazon and sell products. What Amazon provides is just that platform. So they're providing that technology layer that the producers or the sellers use to sell products to the consumers. Okay, so what are the key differences between the pipe versus the platform? One, I kind of mentioned this before, the platform company only provides that infrastructure, the technology to make the transactions possible. Also, it's a decentralized network. So compared to Target, right, where everything's in-house, it's one company, they're doing everything, you have this decentralized network. The producers could be anywhere in the world. It's also multi-directional, a platform. So this is really interesting to me. With Target, they're always the ones selling you the merchandise, but with Amazon, you could actually be both roles. You could be a seller one day and a buyer the next day. So it's kind of this multi-directional effect, which is interesting. And finally, the way that value is curated. So with Target, they probably have some executive team sitting around in a board meeting, right? Like, what are the new products we want to stock on the shelves for 2018? And so they're kind of doing that in-house. But with Amazon, you have community-driven curation and algorithms running. So the platform itself is learning what products are people buying, what kind of reviews are we getting, and that's what's determining what products are surfaced. So that's kind of just the overview of pipes versus platforms. Let's take a little bit of a deeper dive into what actually a platform consists of. So there's 3 layers in what I call the platform stack. The top is the network layer. This is what we're all familiar with. This is your profile or where you send messages to other users on a platform. The middle is the technology infrastructure. So this is the code running or the features. This is what Amazon builds essentially. And finally below that you have the data layer. And so the data is really important, but basically the users on the top layer, when they use the platform, data passes through and gets saved in the database. And this is kind of what Jack's talking about with the legal trends report. That data is really, really powerful, and this is how platforms learn and grow and improve over time. All right, a couple more examples. I really want to pound this concept into your heads. This is a classic example. Taxi company versus Uber, right? A taxi company is a pipe. They own the cars, they hire the drivers, they take the reservations, they drive you from point A to point B. Uber will also get you from point A to point B, but they don't own any cars. They don't hire any drivers. All they do is make an app where you can go on and book a ride from anybody, whoever's driving, right? So Uber is the platform, taxis is the pipe. Let's look at hotels versus Airbnb. Same concept again, right? So the hotel, manages the property, they lease it, whatever. They have property management, they have staff. They handle all these processes to provide you a place to stay. With Airbnb, all they do is provide a place where you can book a room, message with people, and process a payment. They don't own any of the properties. They don't manage any of the properties. It's, again, third-party hosts and guests. This one's a little bit different. So if you think about CBS and YouTube, right? CBS is a pipe. They produce the shows, and they distribute them on the air. YouTube doesn't make any of its own content, so you have third-party creators and watchers. But the difference here is it's not a transaction where you're buying and selling something. So I just want you guys to get a grasp that platforms can kind of be diverse. They can function in different ways. It's not always just buying and selling. And YouTube introduces like a third party as the customer, which is an advertiser. So platforms can be pretty unique in that way. And finally, my last example, Nokia versus the iPhone. Right, I'm sure everybody had the classic Nokia phone back in the day with Snake. We all loved that. They distribute that phone on a pipe model. So they manufacture the phone, they sell it to the consumer. It's pre-packaged with all the features and functionality. There's really no customization. The iPhone is kind of a hybrid. So they have, the phone itself is distributed through the pipe. They sell you the phone, but all the software on top of the phone is a platform. So you have third-party companies, app developers, building these apps, and they can sell it to you. And it's really powerful because think about the customization that enables. You can get any app you want. You can unlock any kind of functionality through your iPhone. And this is really disruptive. And so that's really what I want you guys to gather from all this. I'm sure you know what Amazon is doing to the retail industry, and Toys R Us just went out of business like the other day. So it's really disruptive to the status quo, this new model. So what makes platforms so disruptive? Well, I want to start with this little quote to really illustrate how quickly this can happen, how fast things can change. So in 2007, the 5 major mobile phone manufacturers, Nokia, Samsung, Motorola, Sony Ericsson, and LG, collectively controlled 90% of the industry's global profits. So basically, between those 5 companies, it's pretty much a monopoly. Same year, Apple introduces the iPhone. And then only 8 years later, by 2015, the iPhone generates 92% of global mobile phone profits. So it literally turned the industry upside down and took it over. And I think a big reason why is they introduced this platform ecosystem on top of it that makes the phone so powerful and customizable. Okay, so what makes platforms so disruptive? Well, for one, platforms can unlock new sources of value. So if you think about your car, right? It's sitting in your garage. You're not getting any value out of that if you're not driving it yourself. But with Uber, you can actually turn that unused car into an asset that you can go drive around, pick somebody up, and make money for that. It's like a hidden source of value. Same kind of thing with Airbnb. And if you think about YouTube, right? Like there's probably thousands of hours of like cat videos and random content that you would never get anywhere else except for YouTube. I don't think CBS has any cat video shows coming on air anytime soon. So what's that? Not yet. Maybe they will. We'll see. Maybe they'll learn from YouTube. But it's interesting that you get these new sources of value that like otherwise wouldn't really exist. The other thing that platforms can do is aggregate the participants in an otherwise fragmented industry. So the example I like to give for this, if you think about like if you were a collector of baseball cards or something, right? Like not everyone does that. It's kind of random. You don't probably know too many people in your daily life that would buy and sell baseball cards from you. So it's a fragmented industry. And if you wanted to sell a card, like what are your options? Maybe you go to a pawn shop. They're going to lowball you because you really don't have any other options. It's the only place you can sell it. But then you think about eBay, right? Perfect. It's a platform. It can connect you to millions of card collectors around the world in seconds. So you list your card and you can sell it, and you get maximum value. So aggregating these participants in a fragmented, dispersed industry is really important. Another reason, platforms can displace what I call gatekeepers and reduce costs. So a gatekeeper is basically somebody that has like a stronghold over an industry. Think about the companies you hate, right? Like probably the mobile phone carriers, internet service providers. Nobody likes dealing with these people, but you have no other alternatives. They are gatekeepers. They have a stronghold, stranglehold on the industry. They dictate how the services are provided. They dictate what it costs. You deal with their terrible customer service. It's just how it works. So they're gatekeepers. Platforms can disrupt that by maximizing market competition. So when you get maximal competition, the best value inherently rises to the top, and costs will go down. The other thing platforms can enable is a direct exchange of value, basically cutting out an expensive middleman. So if you think about like the real estate industry, there's brokers, they take a pretty substantial fee, and all they do is connect a buyer and a seller. Well, if you introduce a platform where it's just technology, that fee can be reduced significantly because the platform, there is no human element. It's just technology connecting buyer and seller. And finally, platforms can open up the door for massive scalability because the costs of adding more value to the platform are negligible, essentially zero. So think about Target. If they want to add more value to their Target brand and sell more goods, right? They have to open a new store, they have to break ground, build a building, go buy all the goods, hire all the employees. I mean, it's literally probably millions of dollars invested to add more value to sell through Target. But then if you think about Amazon, like I could literally leave after this presentation and go sign up and start selling something on Amazon today. Amazon doesn't even know that I did that. So the cost of adding more value to a platform is essentially zero. And this is what enables them to scale so rapidly. Okay, so I've talked a lot about platforms and just pipes and the business models. I just want you guys to understand sort of how the internet can really change the game in all these industries. And now we're going to get into the legal industry and how I think this is going to play a role in the future. So what does the legal industry look like today? Well, it's not a platform exactly. It is more of a pipe, and I would say, unfortunately, it's a clogged pipe. So we need a plumber, guys. I don't know. Basically, I think there's a couple of ethical rules, and they have good intentions, but I think these rules are causing the pipe, so to speak, to be backed up. One of them is the fact that only a law firm can provide legal services. So the reason this can be problematic is you're kind of limiting the types of businesses that can come in and create, a service to sell to a client. So that's, people point at that rule and say it kind of, prevents innovation, I guess. The other rule, which I think is probably even more problematic, and a lot of people have identified this, is the rule against non-attorney ownership of a law firm. So the way these platform companies scale up so fast, it takes a lot of money. They get millions and millions or billions even of dollars of venture capital invested. That's not possible in the legal industry, right? You have to be a lawyer to own a law firm. So what we have is sort of, there's no innovation, there's no money, there's no resources, there's no engineering talent being poured into the legal industry. And so in my opinion, this is kind of what backs up the pipe. There's really no incentive for law firms to innovate that much because they're kind of gatekeepers. They pretty much dictate how it goes. If you need legal services, you go to a lawyer. That's your only choice, right? So as a result, no incentive to innovate. The production and delivery of services is kind of inefficient and slow, and the services are overpriced for a lot of people, and they're inaccessible to a lot of people who probably need them. And so I say that currently I think the business model in the legal industry is broken. I know Jack just talked a lot about hourly billing, how you want to maximize that. I think that's fine for now, but I think this is going to change. I think hourly billing is completely backwards because it literally incentivizes inefficiency, if you think about it, right? If you have 8 hours in your workday, why are you going to work on 10 client matters when you're only getting paid per hour, when you could literally just work on 2 or 3 and take a lot longer and make the same amount of money? There's no incentive to be more efficient when you're billing by the hour, really. So that's obviously not necessarily that bad for the law firm, but it is problematic for the client, right? You don't want to be over billed for something. So that's problematic for the client, but I think time-based billing is also problematic for law firms because time is a finite resource. You only have 24 hours in a day. So the problem with that is you can't scale your firm unless you add more time that you can sell, right? So I have my 24 hours. I have to hire another lawyer who also has 24 hours. And then, you get this linear growth curve where each lawyer added to the firm can bill, another 8 hours or whatever it is. The growth potential is capped, though, by the amount of time that you can bill. To me, this doesn't make sense because if you compare it to a value-based business model, there's no limit to value. Value is just defined as, whatever you pay for it, right? So you could have a service that costs $1 million that takes you 10 minutes to render as long as it's that valuable to the client. So with value, you see unlimited kind of growth potential and scalability of services. And I think this is kind of the future that we're going to see is rather than billing for time, you're going to, figure out what the value of the service is and deliver it to the client and as efficiently as possible, because you can sell unlimited amounts of value. Okay, the next thing I want to look at is what I sort of call the spectrum of legal services. So if you put it on sort of a scale, on one side you have, very basic, free even legal services that exist, or legal, some kind of solution. And on the right side, you have, highly complex, high scale, high stakes litigation type cases with millions of dollars and hundreds of lawyers working on it. So that's kind of the complete spectrum, right? And what you'll notice, obviously the costs go up substantially from one end to the other. It starts free and gets really expensive. Also, the service providers at each level are different. So at the low end of the spectrum, we already do have kind of a lot of technology-based solutions out there. There's a lot of free legal information online these days. The internet's basically already starting to kind of change things. We have LegalZoom, we have Rocket Lawyer, we have Avo. There are sources where people can go get legal information or basic legal services without working with a lawyer at all. And that's sort of the low end of the spectrum. Then in the middle, I think there's a big gap. Because at the upper end of the spectrum, like I said, lawyers are kind of the gatekeepers. They don't really have any incentive to go down and serve this middle gap or middle, part of the spectrum, because the cost of the services is too low for the law firms to justify it. But I think this gap is actually a big opportunity today. So I think there are millions of consumers and small businesses and people everywhere that probably are not getting legal services that they need. And the reason why, I think there's two main reasons. One, lack of information. So as a consumer of legal services, it's kind of hard to know when you have a legal issue, why, what services you might need, when you need them, what the benefits are. All this stuff is kind of like a gray area as a consumer. It's hard to really know what services to access and when. And also there's a lot of friction in the market. So the legal industry is very fragmented. It's pretty hard if you think about the process of, accessing legal services. You have to kind of call around, meet with different lawyers, set up some consultations, and this is just to kind of figure out what are your issues and what's the right course of action. There's a lot of friction in that process. That's again kind of what Jack was talking about. That friction kind of prevents people from getting the legal services they probably need. So those two things, in my opinion, create sort of this middle of the market gap. It's basically, the technology can't fulfill those services because of those ethical rules that prevent non-law firms from delivering legal services. And the law firms aren't serving those people either because, like I said, the economics don't work out right now. All right, and so the last thing I want to look at with today's legal industry is the role of technology today. So obviously, we're at a legal tech conference. We're not completely, devoid of technology in the legal industry. We are using it, and there's a lot of exciting stuff happening. But basically, there's a few different ways that I think technology is playing a big role today. One, at law firms. So technology is used pretty much as a tool, right? Products like Clio, products like Lexicata, you use it as a tool. It's a nice to have. You don't necessarily, you could operate your law firm without it. It probably wouldn't be as easy or as efficient, but it's there to help you be organized, save you some time, make your life a little bit easier. It's a tool. And on the consumer side, like I touched on before, they're using technology for basic legal services, things like LegalZoom, downloading free forms, things like that, and also to help with the discovery of their legal issues. So you can do basic research, things like that, on the internet. And the other thing is that early stage platforms are starting to emerge. And this is what I think is getting really interesting, is things like Avo. I think Avo's kind of just scratched the surface personally, but I think there's a lot of potential for these platforms to help kind of connect the gap and help clients and lawyers interact and work with each other and make that whole friction-filled process a lot smoother and easier. And finally, I think the gap is going to narrow. So as we see technology improving at the law firms, with Clio building new features to make you more efficient, all this kind of stuff, the law firm end of the gap will gradually come down. There's downward price pressure in the market already. You can justify taking on more clients when you can serve them more efficiently. And on the other side, technology is also getting more powerful, so they're moving up market a little bit and taking more market share away in that way. Okay, so those are the first two sections. We looked at pipes, we looked at platforms, how the internet business model operates, and we looked at the legal industry today, how it's operating and what role technology plays. The last section is going to be the future. So I want to start off with this quote, and it is, "Software is eating the world." I think this is just a really interesting quote. It's by a guy named Mark Andreessen. You may be familiar with him. He's a famous venture capitalist in Silicon Valley. He's invested in a lot of those big platform companies I was talking about earlier, like Uber and Airbnb. He also was, I think, the founder of Netscape. If you remember, like way back in 1993 or whenever, when the internet first was getting started, he's a big player, basically, all along the way. And so what he said in this article when he said software is eating the world, this is a quote from his piece. He said, "We are in the middle of a dramatic and broad technological and economic shift in which software companies are poised to take over large swaths of the economy. More and more major businesses and industries are being run on software and delivered as online services." So I think this pretty much sums it up really well. This is what we're going to see happen. I mean, I think it makes perfect sense. We're going to see a platform shift. It's already gradually getting started, but I think this trend will continue into the future. And I think this platform shift will bring about four main changes in the legal industry of the future. One, defragmentation of the market, right? So aggregating those market participants who are dispersed onto a single place to interact with clients. Two, better infrastructure. So I think the platforms themselves will become much more advanced, and we'll get more in depth on what that means, but they're going to be able to make the services much more efficient to deliver. Greater liquidity and scalability of services. So as it's easier to access legal services, the liquidity of the market will improve, and that jam in the pipe is eventually going to be flushed with some Drano or whatever. And as a result of that, we'll see services start to scale. So I don't think we're going to be basing our billing on time, like I said. We're going to be basing it on the value to the client, and that's what scalability is. And finally, the closing of the gap. So I kind of already talked about that. The platforms will help law firms take on more clients, but at a lower price point, and technology will get more powerful and automate a lot of the things. Okay, so let's get into each of these in a little bit more detail. So defragmentation of the market. This is already happening a lot with Avo, Rocket Lawyer, things like that. Clients are going to be increasingly using platforms to discover their legal issues and to find and interact with lawyers. So personally, I think if you're not already on Avo and all these sites, you should think about signing up. I think they're poised to grow a lot in the future. And on the other side, lawyers will plug into these platforms. Remember the plug and play, right? To attract new clients and take on legal projects and cases. So I think this is a key thing because it'll reduce the friction that I talked about in the market. It'll make it so much easier for people to find a lawyer, to diagnose their legal problems and figure out what services they need. Better infrastructure. So there's, I think, two really big changes that we're starting to see the early stages of them as well. But these are going to be huge, huge changes in the future. One, automation. So the everyday tasks that you and your staff spend, a lot of time on that are not really valuable, they're just kind of administrative tasks. More and more, those things will be automated away. And I think the automation can be baked right into this platform where you're using the platform not only to find clients, you're also using it to fulfill the services, and the automation can be built right into that. And the other big change, I think, is going to be artificial intelligence. So basically, I think it's going to expand the power and decision-making ability of the platforms themselves. So as computers become smarter, they can start to actually kind of eliminate some of the tasks of the lawyer in terms of like researching and diagnosing the issues, and help guide clients without even working with a lawyer toward the right sort of solution for them. So I think those two changes are going to be huge over the next couple of decades. Greater liquidity and scalability. Like I said before, the business model is going to be based almost entirely on value as opposed to time, right? So as your services become so efficient to deliver, it doesn't make sense to charge for the time. I mean, you're going to take 5 minutes or 20 minutes or whatever it is, you're not going to make much money. So you're going to be charging for the value of the service. Also, the incentives of the law firm will shift more towards being more efficient and scaling through value rather than scaling by adding more time, that linear curve that I talked about. The cost of services will continue to go down, and the accessibility in the market will go up. As liquidity grows, as that pipe becomes unblocked, the flow of services from law firm to client will be significantly improved. And finally, closing the gap, right? So I think, interestingly enough, that gap is what provides sort of a perfect entry point for these next generation platforms to come in and kind of close it and help, bridge the gap between technology and today's law firms and serve those unserved, clients. You'll also notice that I have these arrows. So I think as the platforms get more and more powerful, they will move upstream and they'll gradually consume more and more market share. And so why hasn't this already happened? Well, think about Uber, right? It's actually pretty simple. Like, what is it? It's a map, and you can look at it and see where cars are nearby, and you can request one. That technology's been around for, 20 years already with mapping technology on the internet. So it's not that big of a leap to create Uber. The big thing that allowed Uber to grow was mobile. Now that everybody has a phone in their pocket with them at all times, it made it possible to happen. I just think the market conditions today in the legal industry aren't quite there yet. So there's not enough advanced technology like the automation and the artificial intelligence yet to make the platforms powerful enough to really do the job that they need to do. But I think, like I said, as the infrastructure improves, the technology improves, products like Clio and Lexicata become more and more powerful and automated, this will definitely change. Okay, so my ultimate conclusion from all of this, I think the law firm of the future will be a software-first company. But the interesting thing is, I don't know the answer, but I think it's interesting to think about. Is it going to be today's law firm as we know it that owns that company? Or is it going to be a technology company that comes in and steals the industry? I don't know. But I think the platform shift is going to naturally drive law firms into the software business, so to speak. So that may mean developing your own software in-house. You typically know as the law firm what pain points you have. You're in the best position to solve those. I think we will see law firms building software to deliver services. But like I said with the Uber example, if the market conditions change and the door is opened, so to speak, it could happen quickly where a technology company comes in and sort of steals the industry. If the ethical rules change and we allow, non-lawyer ownership, things like that, we could see a lot of investment and resources and talent being poured into legal. And the role of the lawyer in that case might be reduced to something more like an Uber driver where you're just plugging in, serving needs of clients, and going about your business. So I think this is really interesting. I think this is personally the opportunity for today's law firms to start thinking about how can we build and implement technology as like the backbone of everything we do, not just a tool like it is today, but literally the backbone of all your processes running through automation, and deliver services based on value and do it in an efficient way that is scalable. So what does this all mean for you? I know it's maybe some doom and gloom. I don't want to, discourage anybody. I think these changes are going to be really gradual, so it's not going to happen overnight. Nothing to worry about in the next few years, obviously. But pay attention is the point. Now that you should have a good understanding of this platform model, how different it is from the typical model, just pay attention as you see Alvo and these other companies, emerging. See what they do and just follow it, and you should have a better idea of kind of, what's going to happen and what the right course of action is for you. Keep up to date with technology. Use the latest and greatest. Hopefully you guys already are doing that. You're obviously here at ClioCon. And use technology extensively in your practice. It's, like I said, make it the backbone of fulfilling services however possible. Find ways to sell value instead of time. So this is, rather than just taking on any client matter and billing them by the hour, create packaged, productized services that you can sell and deliver efficiently with automation. I think there's a ton of opportunity for that in today's market. And finally, embrace the changes. Don't resist them. I know lawyers can be skeptical, and we're notorious for slowly changing and adapting to the world around us, but I think this is actually a really exciting time. There's so much cool stuff happening with technology and legal technology. Embrace the changes and get ahead of the curve, because if you're that early guy on the Amazon marketplace, you probably have a multi-million-dollar company now. So just pay attention, keep up to date, and you'll set yourself up for success. All right, so that pretty much wraps up the presentation. I just want to give you guys my contact info. My Twitter is Aaron W. George. My LinkedIn is there as well. Feel free to add me. I do share a lot of content related to this kind of stuff on LinkedIn and Twitter. Like I said, I read a blog pretty much every week about legal marketing or legal technology and stuff. So I'd love for you guys to follow me and keep up with my latest thoughts on the industry. And finally, my email there is as well, aaron@lexicata.com. We also have a pretty big booth. As you guys know, we're the Diamond sponsor, so we would love for you to come check out our product, get to know myself, my business partner, and the rest of our team. We'll give you kind of a demo of what our software can do for your practice. So yeah, that pretty much wraps it up. It went a little faster than expected, so I guess we have time for questions if anybody has any.